Now then, we have the 20th anniversary of Dubnobasswithmyheadman by Underworld to celebrate now in the company of Karl Hyde. Karl, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, and you. How was your Maida Vale experience? We very much enjoyed the session you did for us, and by us, I mean not only Lauren and the station, but us, because we weren't expecting it to, but it took about the first half hour of our show off as well.
Really sorry about
No, it's all right. We were enjoying it. No, we wanted you to do it every day. We were sat here with our feet up listening. It was beautiful.
They should have pulled the plug on us, but we were just rattling on. It was a great sound in there. That was the first time I think we've played and had such a great sound that we enjoyed it. You know, and the vibe in the place was electric.
Yeah, we'll talk lots more about this record, but it does seem fatally astonishing, doesn't it? 20th anniversary.
Yeah, who'd have thought? Who'd have thought we'd have ever got this far and still be here? It's a bit strange. I've got to say, we were saying this the other day. We've never been in a band that's been together this long, you know, and this is the first time we've ever done any of these things. So how do you think? How do you behave? How do you respond to an album that's 20 years old? It's never happened to us before, so we're making it up as we go along.
We'll play some music. We'll play Skyscraper, I Love You, and to get us in the mood for it. I was reading, you talking about the writing process of this, and because I think there's an interesting thing for a vocalist and lyricist, as well as writing music. It's quite hard sometimes to find where all that fits in kind of trancey electro things, isn't it? And I was reading about this. You were sort of making copious notes whilst travelling, little notebooks and things.
Yeah, I do that every day because back in the 80s, I was one of those archetypal singers that the band was always waiting to finish the lyrics, before they could finish the track. And I decided it was never going to happen again. So I write every day, and most of my writing is done just wandering around cities, overhearing conversations, just capturing the stuff that's going on. But that particular session, I was in Debbie Harry's band at the time, and we were recording in Electric Ladyland down on 8th Street.
That all sounds terribly glamorous. Debbie Harry and Electric Ladyland.
It was pretty not glamorous, but I got to say, spending time with Debbie and Chris Stein was amazing. They were two lovely people who really looked after me. And so I was living at the Gramercy Park, which was at that time was a pretty ramshackle, threadbare, flea-bitten place, and which I liked. And so I'd spend nights on the street, really just writing stuff down, and that's where the lyrics from Skyscraper I Love You came from.
And do you again, I think I read something, you sort of described it as painting, like a cubist painting or something. So when you've got the bits, do you kind of make them together as a collage rather than necessarily working them into a narrative?
No, they fall the way they fall, and they're more like journeys. Well, they are. I'm mapping journeys. I'm talking about I'm talking about me, really, in the way that I don't know how to express how I feel in words, so I collect stuff together and say, here's a bunch of stuff, and this is the kind of state of mind I'm in because of the stuff that I've collected. And I remember hearing Lou Reed's New York album, and that changed everything. I had a bit of an epiphany for me, and I thought, here's a guy I respect singing in conversational American. I wonder how he did it. And I just imagined him sat in bars and cafes, just overhearing conversations, writing them down and singing them back. And conversations, standard regular conversations, that are far more interesting rhythmically than the normal poetics of pop or rock lyrics to me. So I can't even speak. And Lou, where are you? And so I thought, well, this is a much more interesting way of working than just trying to sit there and write the cat set on the map.
And obviously there's kind of a fine, romantic tradition going back many years of sitting in bars, and particularly in New York as we celebrate Dylan Thomas and the 100th anniversary, at the moment and everything.
He was a good bar sitter, wasn't he?
He certainly was.
God bless his soul, and all the barmen who've ever served him.
So this is 20 odd years ago, Karl Hyde wandering the streets of New York, and Underworld and Skyscraper, I Love You. Underworld and Skyscraper, I Love You. There's a lot more of that, obviously, if you want to buy the new box set. Funny, I was listening to that, and I was watching people on the ice rink that sprung up outside here, and it all worked perfectly well.
Oh, how very beautiful. Was it an outdoor one?
Yeah, an outdoor ice rink.
Very nice.
Safe playing, Waldteufel and the skaters well, so it worked perfectly.
The sound of sleigh bells.
You were talking about sitting in bars. Presumably that was on the plane, was it, coming in? 30,000 feet above.
Weirdly, that was on the plane going out.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, because it sort of struck me that being down on the dirty streets, you never see any of that when you're up there. Everything looks really beautiful.
Yeah. Karl Hyde is with us talking about this reissue. What did Underworld set out to be? Because you'd come out of that band Frö with Doot Doot. Where for people who don't remember Frö were the band who didn't actually have a name. You had a symbol, didn't you?
Yeah.
But why was it Frö?
We sold it to Prince.
Yeah.
Why was it Frö? It was because it was one of those situations where we just couldn't think of a name. So Rick, he and I are still partners now. We stuck him in a studio and said, look, whatever you say into the mic, that's the name of the band.
Right.
And he went, so it was like, oh, that's really useful. And, being Welsh and arty, we stuck with it. But then we did 2 albums as Underworld Mark 1 that failed miserably on Sire Records and did a lot of touring and finally Rick had enough and decided he knew the direction. Which is pretty right. But in truth, in the beginning, we'd given up being in bands. We didn't want to be in bands. We didn't want to put out albums. We'd formed a company called Tomato. There was a group of artists, musicians. Colin Vercombe from the group Black, he was part of it. Yeah. And the guys were making really cool TV commercials, and we were making the music for them when we were finally putting food on the table. And so we decided we were just going to have a laugh with music, and we weren't going to have it as a serious career, and that's when it took off.
Was there a moment of epiphany, on the rave scene or some electro thing, or Darren Emerson doing some DJing or something, or hearing 808 state? Or was there a moment when you thought, actually, this could really go somewhere?
There was. There were times we got taken to raves, and that was pretty special. That was thinking, oh man, I think this is like the best Pink Floyd ever. Yeah. And then we went to see the On Your Sound System and Adrian Sherwood, and that blew us away. Just the idea that a sound system or that a gig had happened from the second that you open the door. Yes. And that became pretty special. Then we did this 18-hour gig at Glastonbury. Michael Eavis gave us and our friends our own field, and we formed this group called the Experimental Sound Field and built a tower that we performed from, and a quadraphonic sound system that wrapped around the outside of the audience, and we partied for 18 hours non-stop, and that then became, this could be a fantastic group. I mean,
I was going to ask you about the sound system thing, because obviously Dubnobasswithmyheadman would suggest that, and that was the first time I'd sort of heard. I've been to kind of grown up in Bolton and gone to rock gigs and everything. When I started going to punk gigs, they had the reggae sound systems because there were no punk records that they could play, and that seemed to bring two kind of tribes together, really. But that was the first time, I think, that I really experienced the fact that music could be a physical thing. Yeah, and it wasn't just volume. So it was the bass. It was just something you felt in your stomach.
Well, back in the early 80s, that was most of what we were listening to was dub reggae, because it was so physical, and it was playing with pure sound in the way that early German electronics was playing with just pure sound. So those two things we were listening to early German stuff and things like Low, David Bowie and Brian Eno's Low, and then dub reggae, and those things were really fused together. So in the early days of Frö, our idea was that we were going to be this very white crossover dub electronic group, and started to work with people like Dennis Bovell, Blackbeard, who was very, very keen on the idea, and we were going down there to his studio, and the truth was we got turned by the Queen shilling, because we were so poor that when CBS Records offered us a load of money, we said, all right, and what do you want us to do?
I mean, there's a eulogy. We touched on rave there, and in the book that accompanies the reissue, there's a kind of eulogy to rave in the book here. Yeah. And you paint quite an appealing picture of the sort of the sense of abandonment, of being lost in that music, an almost transcendental kind of freedom experience about it, which was also, of course, not just the music and the chemicals that were fueling it, but the fact that a lot of the venues were kind of unconventional and not policed in any way.
It was. It sounds like a cliche, but it was more punk than punk to me. I'd felt extremely let down by punk, because for me, most of the bands that that flew the flag, they signed to record labels, and they became part of the mainstream, and most of them only played to a few people in some grotty pubs anyway. But
I suppose the punk bands, I mean, they were like, if you listen to the Sex Pistols, it's rock and it's traditional guitar-based rock and roll. It's very exciting at the time, but the possibilities were not kind of limitless from that bass, perhaps.
No, and they referred straight back into the mainstream again. They went right back into the culture. So it was into the traditional culture, and then you had rave, and you had 10,000 people in a warehouse somewhere that were outsiders, and we'd always felt that way. We'd always felt like outsiders, and punk was the first thing that got me really excited, and then here were these people doing it. They were actually living outside of it, making records for themselves outside, completely making up their own industry, as it were, and we wanted to be, that felt like home for us.
So what do we have here? We got Underworld, Dubnobasswithmyheadman, this full sort of vinyl-sized box set thing here with loads of CD, all kinds of stuff, and a book and everything. And artwork from Tomato.
Yeah, still from Tomato. We're still working together. We're still jamming and stuff, and it's extraordinary amount of material. We've got a massive archive, and Rick, my partner. What
were the great surprises? And sorry to cut across you, but what were the great sort of discoveries that you thought, wow, I haven't heard that, and that sounds amazing?
You got me there. Because we've been pulling stuff out over the years and jamming and making recordings of jammings, and I tend not to go there. I'm not somebody that really likes to revisit the past very much, so this has been an interesting project because we've been forced to listen to material. I've been forced to listen to material in order to learn how to perform it as near as damn exactly the way I did 20 years ago. Yeah. Rick has had to recreate it because that first album most of it was recorded on 12-track tape. And first of all, we had to find a machine that actually worked, and then finding equipment that could replay that stuff.
Did you have to bake the tapes and all that?
It was close. It was really close to it. You had one shot to record it, and then finding synthesizers, machines that could play the samples back. And so, in a way, Rick almost had to recreate half of what you hear on that remastered album. It was a huge labour of love for him.
So, having done this one, you have to do other stuff as it comes up at the anniversary.
There's one more to do. There's one more to do like that, and then the rest, I think, were archived properly.
Right. Okay.
Somebody else can do that.
Well, it's out now anyway, so you can get
that's great.
Dubnobasswithmyheadman.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it because one of the things that it does show is the material that didn't quite make it, and you can hear, that was part of. There's a track called Mother Earth, which was part of a pre-album, like a middle album that didn't make it, a collection of material that you write to throw away to get into the swing of things, you know. Right. And there's a whole bunch that were part of that body that didn't quite make it. Others which were almost something that you'll hear on the finished album, and it's nice at last to be able to show people the story behind something, the lineage, if you like, of tracks that became famous.
Yeah. And something to suit every pocket, because it's on CD, 2 CD deluxe, double vinyl, HD Blu-ray, 5 CD super deluxe editions, or my favourite one, the 10 wax cylinder edition.
Something for everybody. Actually, I prefer word of mouth.
Underworldlive.com, you can see there's some dates, I think, but not until early next year.
Yeah, March, we're taking the whole Dubno Bass show out again. It wasn't something we only wanted to do one-off, but it sold so fast that we thought, well, let's see what happens. And again, the UK European tour just sold out in days. So it's something that we've always wanted to try, play in venues that weren't as messy as we normally play in. Yeah,
no, it sounds great, yeah. All right, well, great to catch up with you. And we're going to play Dark and Long. What do you remember of this?
I remember it being extremely dark and extremely long.
Well, it might be a bit shorter in this version as we approach the top of the album. But anyway, did you get back to Worcester much?
Rarely. My family's still there. They're listening. Hello, Mum. Hello, Dad. I love it out there. The reason that I love it is that it's the reason that I left was it never changed. And that's the reason I love it now. No, I'm an Essex boy now. Right. Died in the war.
Okay. Great talking to you, Karl.
Thank you, man.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.